And
is the idea to exchange?
hi, Van. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, Van. So this is Van. This is John. And
Hi, Don.
yeah,
Hi there.
I'm just trying to explain what we are doing. So during this period, we have more students from more schools in Russia. We have more schools in the U.S. We have right now we have more than 300 students total participating, and they are supposed to create a digital story at the end to 2-minute stories to share their experience and what they found in the forests.
And who is the audience that they're sharing this information with?
They mainly share with their peers, but we also want them to actually draw attention of the communities. When we had the last Skype session in our pilot project, one of the questions we asked them, what do they think, how can they engage communities into this? And they had different suggestions, starting with Facebook and then with Rotary clubs.
Is the forestry that's being conducted in Russia, are all the forests federally owned, or are there private ownerships, or is it mixed like it is here?
I think it's mixed. There's a platform, the Global Forest Watch platform, that allows you to see if it's a managed forest or protected area.
Okay.
So they can find out just going to their platform. Yeah, but it's mixed. It's whatever for instance, we have one of the participating schools in the U.S. is school in Chicago. So they basically go into urban forests, so whatever they have around.
Right.
Same thing with Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is a mixture of teaching students how to collect local data, how to use the remote sensing, how to put everything together to do their research, and at the same time how to convey this story to their peers and to their communities, and and actually also to become global citizens, basically to be aware that probably the same problems that they observe in their communities happen everywhere.
Sure.
So this is the main. I think this is the main mission of the project, and we have. This project is this particular one that is going on now. As I said, it's funded by Eurasia Foundation, and in the framework of this project, we had 2 invited professionals coming from Russia and 2 invited professionals going from the U.S. to Russia. And Katya, she's a journalist and she's visiting from Russia. And one of the requirements is that she doesn't only work for the project, doesn't only contribute to the project, but also contributes to the better understanding between 2 cultures, and also trying to see what other projects she can start connecting to countries.
That's great.
Yeah.
How could we help?
Yeah, so we were wondering what, looking at your website, it seems that you are doing lots of work that is connected to forests and to forest health. And if you can tell us a little bit about what exactly you're doing and how, and I think you also involve students into this.
Yeah, we have some limited student involvement. We do some stream monitoring in one particular watershed that's kind of emblematic of Western Oregon. So we've been conducting stream monitoring and fish counting actually in a little creek called Canton Creek for the last 4 or 5 years. It's been great. We've been able to engage a lot of the students in the Phoenix School out of Roseburg, Oregon.
So what exactly do they do?
They put on their scuba gear and they count juvenile steelhead.
Wow.
And we collect the data over the entire watershed. So the watershed is, I don't know how many river miles, but it's 30,000 acres, and we've surveyed the entire stream for fish. So we have 4 years or 5 years of fish data, just how many fish are present, and we compare that with habitat conditions and try to ascertain where the fish are and aren't. It tells us what's happening on the ground in terms of habitat. So what we do is particularly focused on kind of forestry relates, or just land use in general, but how land use affects rivers and water quality and fisheries and all the attributes of and benefits of a stream and or a stream system. So here in Oregon, in Washington, and Northern California, forests are so integral to that, to stream health. So without forests, we wouldn't have. In fact, forests right now are pretty much the only intact parts of the river systems that we have left. I mean, most of it's been urbanized agriculture, dammed and diked. So the last remaining intact rivers are usually in forests here in Western Oregon or Western United States.
Yeah.
So that's the story that we work on policy. We work on kind of trying to create science-based and informed policy. So things like the monitoring program really help us tell that story. And then we're doing a lot more videos nowadays. That's probably our biggest outreach tool, is doing kind of professionally done videos that help try to tell that story and influence decision makers.
Interesting. Yeah, because we're also trying to ask students to create videos, and they're, of course, they're like student videos, but who is making your videos? How do you do it?
We have one of our board members is a professional filmmaker, a guy named Shane Anderson, and he right now is doing all of our videos, but we expect as the program grows Shane won't be able to actually handle it. I think we have 4 films planned this year. They're short films, but we've done some more feature type things, and we're embarking on a big feature film for next year on the Eel River in Northern California, which is a much bigger project.
When you say a feature film, how long would that be?
Well, it's still in we just raised the initial seed money to get it off the ground, and we anticipate it being at least an hour long, but potentially, up to a 2-hour documentary.
Oh, so it's real.
It's kind of aligned with Patagonia's film Damnation. We're trying to recreate something with that kind of spirit and content. So that's a much bigger deal. And then we have another feature film planned for the year after that, which is actually forest related. It's the Northwest Forest Plan, which is the federal policy which dictates U.S. government's management of publicly owned lands in the western United States. And they're revising that plan as we speak in the next 3 or 4 years. So we're going to tell that story as well. But it's 24 million acres of public land between Northern California to Washington. So it's a lot at stake.
When is that going to happen? What time period?
It's happening over the next. They just started, so it'll probably 3 to 5 years.
Okay, because that certainly would align with this particular project, the Global Forest Link project. Yeah, like having students go out, make observations, document it, learn, what's causing the change, whether it's fire, drought, insect infestation, overdevelopment, blah blah blah, all that stuff, and and then again, from our standpoint, there's a lot of good education that happens, but it gets lost because it only happens to the kids that are involved in it. So we're trying to get them to do more outreach and create what we call digital stories so that they can share their experiences, not only with the current audience, but with future audiences. So the next group of students can see it and go, oh, that's what they did. Well, we can do that and better, and so on. So, kind of build on that and, create like a legacy of the work they've done.
Yeah, there's another organization that is very in the forest volunteer driven that I had thought about since I initially spoke or connected with you guys. The organization is called BARC, and it's here in Portland. They are very focused on Mount Hood National Forest, which is just outside of Portland here, in a pretty large public landscape. But they have a whole volunteer network of people that are out in the field observing and collecting pictures and data and trying to leverage that with decision makers. So they're kind of the watchdog group for the Mount Hood National Forest. They're somewhat unique because there's not a watchdog group in every forest that we work in, but here in Portland there is one. That is probably the most, besides our little monitoring program, the most active group that have boots on the ground, kind of, so to speak, in collecting data or information or kind of watchdogging the federal government's activities on public lands. And then we have another campaign which is targeted at private lands in Oregon specifically. And that's just trying to reform the state laws that govern private timber harvests in Oregon, which are far behind those of California and Washington state. So Oregon is the timber beast of the West Coast, and we produce a lot of timber, and it has a massive effect on rivers in particular.
Mm-hmm. So that's actually an aspect that we haven't really delved into, but it makes sense. Is I mean, we really hadn't just focusing on forests, but expanding the connection between forests and waterways and wildlife and all the other things that are connected to it. So
yeah, there's been a lot of attention here in Oregon because our laws are far behind our neighboring states in terms of river protection, but also because the use of toxic herbicides is pretty predominant in private forestry here, and it's also more lenient than it is in other states. So we use substances, and we can allow for aerial spraying in places that under conditions and with substances that aren't allowed in other states. So there's been a lot of public discourse about how that is or isn't affecting water quality, human health, and everything else. That we have a film out now called Behind the Emerald Curtain that is really trying to tell that private land story. And I think there's a short version of it on our website.
I watched the short version. Yeah.
So that's basically what's happening on private lands in Oregon. If you look at it, it looks pretty much, from an aerial perspective, a lot of these watersheds look like open pit mines because they have so many private lands and so much logging is happening in them that it's, the streams are down to bedrock and lost all the topsoil and full of sediment, and the fish are dying, and it's not good.
So this is a great connection, and we'd love to continue to explore ways that we can help support the message you're trying to get out, but do it through youth education. We work with schools and different youth organizations. Right now, we've initially the first two phases focused on U.S. and Russia, but we got a small grant to expand it to other countries next year. So, and of course, we have the whole United States that we want to target.
We hope that next year the Oregon students will be participating, the Portland students will be participating. Yeah, just like this time it was really unfortunate timing for them, but we already sort of talked to them.
I don't know if you've thought of this, but one idea that just occurred to me is, we have a lot of indigenous tribes in western United States and Oregon in particular. Many of them, the coastal tribes in Oregon, there are three at least that I think would be potentially an opportunity to engage students from the tribal communities who happen to live among this mosaic of federal and private timberlands. That might be an interesting connection to make.
So I've done some projects in the past with tribal schools, and usually the best way to do it is, kind of having a connection inside that, is endorsing the project and, making sure it aligns with their values and so on and so on. So I think that's a great idea. We would want to have, some sort of a local connection that we could talk what would be the best way to engage them. That
Yeah, I would, if you have an opportunity, look at the Spirit Mountain Community Foundation. Um, they are an extension of one of the coastal tribes that both have some resources but have a large degree of emphasis on two things, education and the environment as it relates to their community. And there may be some real opportunities for from what I'm hearing at least, of your goals to liaise with somebody like one of those coastal communities that actually have, or tribal communities that have both resources through, basically through casino money, but also have an interest in, they're also active in actually actively managing forests. I mean, they have forest lands that they're harvesting. But they're somewhat unique in the way they're not as aggressive typically as what an industrial private landowner would be, and they're not as protective as what the federal government does in terms of protecting its land. So they're somewhat in the middle, and certainly an interesting opportunity to engage youth, because there's a lot of emphasis in engaging youth.
Mm-hmm.
On some of these tribes with resources to do so.
That's a great suggestion, yeah.
Yeah, do you know how can we connect with them, just like writing?
They have an extensive website. They give us money, and we get fairly substantial grants from them.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, we have a decent-sized grant now to work on private lands policy reform from the Spirit Mountain Community Foundation. And I believe, well, their executive director is married to one of the founders of my organization, so that was our connection. But I don't think that's. I mean,
that's not necessary. We don't have to marry anybody.
No, I don't think so. I think they are, from what I read of their website and my interactions with the people themselves, there is a clear focus on two things: education and environment.
Wonderful.
Seem potentially lucrative. Now, the Russia connection, I don't. Are indigenous people? I don't even know. Are there indigenous? Are there tribal people in Russia?
I think there are in the
Inuit,
in the Asian part in Siberia.
Yeah.
They're probably like connected to indigenous people here, because actually they originally came from Russia.
Okay.
Through Alaska.
Well, that'd be an interesting story to tell.
I'm pretty sure that.
Part of doing the global connection is creating an understanding of how what's happening locally affects everyone in the world, or what's happening globally affects you locally, because American kids don't understand that at all, and if they even know anything about their own local community, I taught middle school for a long time, and I can tell you that, I mean, that most of them are not even aware of their own local history, local leaders, local environmental issues. So the idea is to get them to be involved in authentic learning, where they become storytellers and reporters, and they're sharing their stories with kids in other parts of the world, and they're starting to learn that, well, these same things are happening in other parts of the world, and maybe somebody has a solution that we can enforce in our area, and so on and so on. So it's the sharing of ideas, best practices, trying to solve existing problems but prevent future problems, and getting this dialogue going, because kids are very ethnocentric, and they don't understand that in these days anything that happens environmental-wise, health-wise, peace and security-wise, anywhere in the world is going to affect their quality of life. So, that's part of this process.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Well, I'm not certain what we could do to help, but I'm certainly open to it. I love the idea of it. I do think least through the storytelling that we're engaging in, it's certainly been one of the most powerful tools that we've unveiled in the last several years. We get more exposure through storytelling than any of the kind of the behind-the-scenes policy or political work that we do, which is fairly obvious. But also, it just the traditional methods of mailing people and all that kind of stuff just doesn't reach people anymore. So it's a highly effective tool, and I think there's another fellow here in Portland, a guy named Chad Brown, who's an Army veteran, who's a fly fisherman who started an organization called Soul River, and he is engaging disadvantaged, or I would say underserved youth, troubled youth in the Portland urban area, and taking them on, basically teaching them to fly fish, but taking them to forests and rivers, not just in Oregon, but I think he does trips to Alaska and other things, taking disadvantaged youth and being mentored by veterans. Program that's been wildly successful. He may be an interesting person to reach out to because he's actually engaging children in his program. And I believe he has a website too, Soul River. I'd look it up right now, but pretty sure he has a website. I don't know how many trips he does, but he is actively engaging youth on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah, this will be really interesting connections that you've mentioned, each of them.
So our next phase will be doing recruiting of participants and experts. People, when I say experts, people that we can have invite to do a webinar that will share their insights and knowledge, with our students. We record it, so it's available for playback. So the next few months we'll be doing that with the hopes of, really starting the project at the beginning of the next school year, and then that phase will go into for the first semester, so it'll end, in December. So this is the time we really want to make those connections, see who's interested, get them involved, kind of really expand the opportunities for them, because this is great for them. It doesn't really cost them anything, and they can get trained on how to use it. They can take advantage of the tutorials that we've already created, and of course they're doing something really wonderful for their own community if they do this. So.
Well, we're happy to help in any way we can. I don't know what kind of time commitment we could make to it, but if it's something like a webinar or engaging on some level, we're certainly open to that. We would just need to know some details about what the time commitment would be and what we'd actually have to do. But I like what you guys are trying to do here. It sounds great. There's such power in telling stories, and particularly from a youth perspective, that's something that you don't see a lot of that I think could be powerful for certain.
Wonderful. Well, we have some homework to do. Look up all of these things that you just told us, and
yeah.
And then it's always good just to, give us some time for us to think about, what would be some ways to connect and collaborate, and we can look at more of the resources that you have on your website, and we can send you a few things to look at, and we could take it from there.
The other one, there's of the funders that are funding either conservation or education, or there are two of them that come to mind in Oregon, at least. The Oregon Community Foundation being one, and the second being the Meyer Memorial Trust. There's a huge emphasis on diversity, and that's not just organizational diversity, but it's engaging underserved communities. So that is a tribal, here in Oregon, that's tribal communities. In the urban areas, there are African American communities, Hispanic communities, and so you might find some opportunities to engage segments of the populace that are underserved in this project. That seems like maybe a logical fit that could be lucrative in terms of getting support from some of the larger funders in Oregon, which is we don't have the largest funders in the world, but they're Meyer Memorial Trust is probably one of the I would guess they're the largest in Oregon. They give out quite a lot of money, and they definitely have an emphasis on environment, and they definitely have an emphasis on education and diversity.
Wonderful.
So they support us as well, but not on those things. Actually, in diversity, they support us, but not in education.
And what is your educational component? This is like the films, and do you do anything else?
Yeah, we don't really try to sell that as education, even though I think they are informative. We try to keep them very honest and truthful, statistically accurate, so they're kind of irrefutable in terms of the data that we use or the facts that we use. But when they really are outreach, they're citizen engagement tools. They're aimed at largely adults, and so far we haven't done any youth-directed storytelling. Certainly open to that idea.
What is the call to action when somebody watches one of these films? What do you hope they'll do after that?
Kind of depends on, like, the current film that we have out now. We have a little package. We have send out a DVD with a handful of postcards that are addressed to the governor of Oregon, with a call to action about making some changes that are more protective for water resources with regard to private land forestry.
So are you hoping that this is something they'll do as far as like things they'll vote for, or they'll just voice their opinion on to help guide legislation, or what?
In Oregon, we have a little bit longer term perspective, at least on private land forestry. It's such a massive political construct here that there are no active pieces of legislation that aim at this, because the timber industry is so powerful here. So we are aiming at the governor just with an appeal with thousands of people, telling her that they'd like to see reform of forest practices. But we will ultimately probably be pushing for a citizens initiative because the legislature is kind of bought and owned by the industry.
So the term reform of forest practices is a pretty important concept, and that itself would be a real interesting educational topic where young people, high school students, we're even working with some college students, can talk about how, what are some types of reform that can happen in their community. So there's Portland. As I said, we're working with Iowa. They're facing a lot of the same things.
Big farming there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously Northern California, and we're going to be working with Canada in the next phase, and they're dealing with a lot of these issues, and we're also monitoring what's happening in other parts of the world. So we're getting reports on that. So that alone is an interesting topic. So it's something that they can share knowledge on. When somebody says reform, what does that mean? What's the compromise that is going to make, the business owners happy, but at the same time preserve the environment,
Sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah, we have obviously details about what our ideas for reform are. That's part of the narrative that we do. We also do a lot of events. We've probably done, I would say, 15 to 20 screenings of our current film so far. We intend to do more. And, they range, in the audience size is 100 or 200 people typically. But, we have panels of these things that speak after the film and try to answer questions. We have Q&A materials that we hand out to kind of describe what reforms are needed. And we have the call to action, which is at this point, because there is no legislation or decision point, we're just making appeals to the governor. Typically, though, we do have something more specific to ask of activists or viewers of our film, where there's an active decision point, maybe a piece of legislation, a policy decision made by a government agency or something like that that's forthcoming. On private lands, that is somewhat unique because we don't have that, largely because there's such a powerful infrastructure here.
Good.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really very informative. And we were always struggling with suggesting to students what they can do to improve the conditions of forests or ecological conditions in their communities. And I think this is the great idea to go deeper in this policy, land use, management.
Yeah, I'd be happy if you guys would find it valuable. We have lots of DVDs of our current film. We'd be happy to share some copies with you that you could kind of get a better sense of what we're aiming at here in Oregon. And definitely some places. I mean, most of these private lands are accessible for kids. They're surrounded by small communities throughout Western Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly opportunities for kids to go traipse around an industrial forest and make their own decisions about what that looks like, feels like, and otherwise is.
Yeah, this is a great topic and great idea. Yeah, we would love if you can share your DVDs with us, your films with us.
Yeah, if you could just send me an address to send, we're happy
Sure.
to post in the mail.
Yeah.
And we may include our little Q&A or something like that, and if you want some background, but it's pretty self-explanatory. We log right through streams here in Oregon. We allow clear-cut logging right through small streams. There's no protective buffer, and this erosion that takes place afterwards because it's wet here has huge impacts.
Yeah, and I will send you the link to this tool that we have for the pictures, and if you can suggest how we can improve it, like the questionnaire, the data that they collect, it might be useful to you. Then we
Sure,
can talk
happy
about
to help.
Mm-hmm.
I like what you guys are trying to do, and wish you the best of luck. We'll help in any way we can.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
guys.
Thanks for your time.
We'll be in touch. Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, Yvonne, so we'll see you tomorrow.